First thing, sorry, I'm sitting down. Not feeling too great this evening, so standing up's a bit of a challenge. We should all know that as of November last year, we need, as part of the terms and conditions of having an amateur radio licence, be able to demonstrate that we comply with the rules on electromagnetic field strength and electromagnetic radiation compliance. And this is a safety issue. So the 18th of November was the last phase where it covered frequencies below 10 megahertz. In short, the easiest thing to think about this one is that wherever you've got your antenna, and that's any part of the radiating part of the antenna, has to be a certain distance called the compliance distance away from any non-involved person. Okay, and the way that that seems to be defined is you are an involved person. And if you have another radio amateur with you, they are also an involved person, so they're excluded from that. So you can fry your brains out as much as you like. But your wife is not.
So if everybody in the country's got an amateur licence, it doesn't apply any of this?
Quite possibly. But you still have to demonstrate that you comply, even if the fact that nobody can get within 200 yards of my antenna. That's a perfectly valid thing, as long as you then do the calculations to say that your compliance distance is less than 200 yards. It's quite simple. There are three ways that I can think of, there are probably more, of actually trying to demonstrate compliance. You could actually try and measure the field strength directly. I wouldn't advise it. It's bloody difficult. You can model it, but that's not for the faint-hearted and is probably less accurate than we would want it to be. The easiest way of doing it is to use the calculator, which the RSGB have nicely put up on their website. It's quite rudimentary, shall we say. And as in the fact that it always errs on the high side, so it will always say that you're not compliant rather than you are. The reason then is that if you can get it to tell you that you are compliant, you're probably compliant. And if it tells you that you're not compliant, then you might have to do some more work to be able to demonstrate that you are, or you might not be. That's for your problem to work out, unfortunately. There's a link there which I'll circulate later on that tells you where that new calculator is. It's now a web-based application, so it's not a downloaded Excel spreadsheet, although I still think you can get it as a downloadable.
Good wow.
Yeah. But it seems to be reasonably okay, from what I can tell. So what I'm going to do now, quite simply, is switch to it, hopefully. Okay, so that's live on the RSGB EMF calculator. And you can see that there's a few bits along the top, up here. And the first thing to do is to put in your details of your location, of where your radio station is. So I've done that there.
Sorry to interrupt, Kerry, but do you know whether they're logging that information?
No, as far as I know, they're not. But that's as far as I know. They're not. Okay. The next thing I would tend to do is create a backup file. This creates a backup file on your local machine. And although we've got no configurations in it, there's a couple I did earlier, so it just saves it as a JSON file, which is a text file. There's nothing really in that. It basically got your user info that you put in earlier. And then if you've got any configurations with various antennas and things like that, that was all included in there. And it just means that the calculator can read that back in again. Okay. I created one earlier, which was quite deliberately done, which was for an 80 metre using a long wire antenna. Why not? The first thing to look at is this bit down here, this section, okay, which is all about how much power are you throwing into the antenna, or into your antenna and your line, okay. And basically, you just select frequency, or the band that you're at, the frequency gets filled in automatically, so you don't have to select individual channels within the band, just spot frequencies, it's that whole 80-metre band. The transmit, the transmit mode, you've got a load of options. You can sit and think on one that's in there. And this is where the worst case that I can think of is FM. Yeah. Okay, because you're transmitting, while you're transmitting, it's 100% carrier. Okay, so I would say always try FM first, because if it works on FM and it says you're compliant, it doesn't really matter what else you transmit on, it will still be compliant. So hence I did that. It will fill in the mode factor that says that's 100% of your carrier, whether it's modulated or not there. I've put the amount of watts that we set the transmitter at as the maximum legal amount that we're allowed to use. You can go above that, it will let you do that if you've got particularly, unless it's an absolutely perfect, you know, perfect radiator will have a directivity factor in there. That becomes much more interesting if you're using a beam. But for the moment, let's just assume, you know, for 80 metres, I've chucked up a long wire, horizontally polarised, so it will work out how much power is actually being put into the antenna, taking that gain into account. And I've said that my antenna is 6 metres up in the sky. Okay, I chose that number for a reason, and I'll tell you in a minute. So you can change all of these. I've put the directivity factor, and that's in addition to whatever the long wire calculates it as. Okay, so its gain is that. But if you've got a particular antenna, you know, a Yardie with a 10 dB forward gain, then you put 10 dB in there, but there's another warning to come on doing that. Okay, so it will calculate what your peak and average EIRPs are. Okay, and underneath at the bottom, it will have calculated, hopefully, where we are. This little section in red will virtually always be red unless you're transmitting very little power, because it basically says you're transmitting more than 10 watts and peak power more than 100 watts. If you're transmitting less than 10 watts, then you're excluded by default anyway. You don't have to. You can actually put that in as your compliance. I don't transmit more than 10 watts. Okay. The reason I chose all of those numbers is because there are two ways of calculating this thing. Okay. The left-hand one is the way of calculating it, and you'll see it's all the same ITU-T recommendation, K52, but one of them was the 1998 limits that, to be honest, were woefully bad and made some assumptions that just weren't correct, and the 2020 limits are the ones that were corrected. And this one says that the compliance distance is 3.6 metres under the 2020 rule, and I'm 4.2 metres away from an average person. And it assumes an average person is 1.8 metres tall. So even if they stood directly underneath the main lobe of my antenna, they would still be different, still be well away from that, so it's green. You only have to get one of those to go green. Okay? So you can choose which one you want to do for. You don't have to go for both. Okay? You can. So if I change that to 8 metres, sorry. They'll both change to green. Okay. But
Am I right in saying that where that says there compliance distance 3.6?
yes,
So say for argument's sake that wire antenna, if I've got that up on a pole in my garden, as long as it's 12 foot in the air, it'll be compliant.
It needs to be 3.6 metres,
3.6 is 11 foot 9 inches.
yes, away from any person that happens to be standing underneath it that's not
So if
involved.
it's attached to your house,
So
then
it's,
the neighbours in.
So you need to add
it's 12
1.8
foot plus
metres
the
on
height
it.
for the person.
You got it.
Right.
Yeah, so if you've got visitors coming, you have to measure how high they are to
Yeah.
work out whether you can comply.
Oh, I'll put one of them things across the board.
Just have a laser.
Radiation pattern on the door.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Antenna's 18 foot up at the lowest.
Okay, so
Another
that,
question I asked.
yes,
If you've got a mast that's capable of, like, I don't know, we'll say 5-6 metres, and then you can crank it up, do you have to calculate it at the highest point? Or-
you have to calculate it at the lowest point.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Does that, Kerry, does that mean people inside a house as well?
Yes, yes. Yeah, and that's a problem for me.
So if that wire comes down from my roof, say, and it's on, say, a TV upstand, so
Yep.
it's like, I don't know, 3 foot above the guttering, and it comes down like that.
Yeah.
And that's next door's bedroom window,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that's not compliant then, because
Absolutely.
when he's in bed, he's
Yeah.
getting the radiation.
Yeah, I've got a vertical antenna, it's 10 metres tall, parked on my gate post, and it actually collapses down nice and easy. When it's up, if my neighbour, Susie, is in her front room, then she would be within that compliance distance. So that's just not compliant, I can't use it.
Unless you
You
live
can.
in, unless you live in
Can
a
use
small
it.
house.
I can ask her not to go in that room,
Well, no, I mean,
as long as it's an agreed.
Sorry, Kerry, I mean, I'm being contradictory, but the point is, it's not an absolute, I cannot use my antenna.
No, it's not, no.
It is, you have to mitigate it. So as you say, you know, you sit you out the window,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
she's
yeah.
gone to bed, I can use my
Yeah,
reg.
yeah.
You know, sort of thing. This is where I think a lot of people have jumped out the teacup on it.
Yeah.
And said, I can't use it because it's not compliant, like Eddie.
Yeah,
You know, well, if you're sitting in bed eating a toasty, which you won't
Yeah.
complain because it'll keep it warm, but,
yeah. Yeah, you're quite right, Lynn. The fact that this says, if this says compliant, end of story, you don't have to do anything else. If it says non-compliant, then there's quite a lot of things you can do. For example, mine's on the gate post. I mean, theoretically, I should worry about what happens if a delivery guy walks up the footpath to my gate and leaves a parcel next to my post, which they do, or throws it over the ledge, which most of them do.
Gentlemen, light reminder, this is being recorded for the benefit of others. Noise dampers.
Yeah. So one mitigating factor you can do is to put a sign on your front gate saying, caution,
oh, I've hazard.
yes, do not enter.
If the gate post is the gate handle's
Yeah.
hot, do not enter.
Yeah. Or I could get a formal agreement with my neighbour that I will let her know when I'm about to transmit and she won't go into her front room. So I could do that.
So if my neighbour goes to bed in a wetsuit, he'll be all right.
Or in a normal tinfoil suit, you mean?
Kerry,
Yes.
this is for the UK. What are the rules like around the world in comparison to this?
Okay, well, this is actually international. It's the International Convention on Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, or radiation.
No one in the States seems to take any,
Hmm?
nobody in the States seems to take any notice of it.
Yeah,
do
yeah.
they?
But the difference in the States is they've normally got a lot more room.
They are actually complying with this.
Yes,
They are taking notice of it in the States.
yes.
In fact, they're ahead of the UK.
I haven't seen anything on YouTube.
The problem is with our country is
Just
that
because we're not
we all
paying
live
attention,
in
John.
sort of this
Yeah.
mediocre homes, don't we? We all
Yeah.
live in estates or whatever where we haven't got room for this, to be honest.
Yeah,
It's all right if you live in a small holding with an acre field to put your antenna in, isn't it?
yeah.
You live in a council estate, you're knackered, isn't it?
Just leave the area where it is and move the wife into the field.
Have we still
Get
got
her-
the
get her
timing
get her
where it was like
license.
6 minutes keyed up or anything? Like
That's
what it was
right at the top left-hand corner there.
Okay,
It's
I
got
can't
how
see
much
that.
time you would transmit within a 6-minute period.
So if you're in So, like you say, if your neighbour was in front room and you say wanted to do a key of, well, just have a quick QSO with somebody for, say, up to about a minute, maybe
Yep.
2 minutes,
Yeah.
would that be allowed? Or would that still be a no-no?
As long as you can demonstrate that that is what you do, or at least you can convince whoever comes to do it is a viable mitigation. Okay. I have not heard of anybody being pulled up on this yet, and I think it's incredibly unlikely, considering the fact that there's no money going into it to actually enforce it from the licence terms.
Okay.
The only time I can see this being actually called up is if you get a complaint from somebody and they come and do a site, your shack check, your radio check, and they'll just say, have you done your compliance certificates? Yeah, fine, next. And if you haven't, well, you better go and do those then. You know,
Quick question, if you are not using your shack and it's non-compliant, how does that affect what you were telling them?
if you're not using your shack, then
Take your aerial.
your transmit power is
No,
zero.
but if it's illegal,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not using it, nobody can do anything about it.
That's right, yeah. Yeah.
This
Hence the
6 minute
importance of
period,
keeping a good log.
Sure.
So if somebody comes and challenges you and you say, I keep a good log and I did not transmit
Sure,
during
sure,
those
sure.
periods. Yeah. Okay.
that 6 minute period,
Yeah.
what about if I use a 6 minute period while I'm not using the radio?
Yeah, it's any 6 minute period.
If there's any 6 minute period.
Yeah, no, there's not any 6 minute period from your perspective. So if you transmit for 6 minutes continuously one day, then you need to change that to 100% transmit time. That's the way they look at it.
Then do that on the nets.
Yeah.
And more than 6 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you could put a 2 minute timer on your rig, most of them, to say, it's going to cut me off if I transmit for more than 2 minutes. But, there's various things you can do.
But then is that not actually slightly inaccurate? Because if you're transmitting on SSB, for example, you could be having a 6 minute QSO and
Yeah.
you'd still be
Yeah.
compliant because your overall
Yeah,
effective peak power and your average power
Yeah.
would be considerably reduced on that basis.
that's right. And that's exactly, if I was to change that to SSB, where are we? No, I've lost it, I can't see it. Must be underneath. There we are. Come on. Okay, you can see it's changed the mode factor down to 20%. So even if you were transmitting for half of that time, it then assumes that the packet shaping and everything else, the volume of your voice, is going to reduce that down to around about 20%. So it does try to take that into account.
So what difference does that would actually make now on compliance distances, just out of interest?
Quite a lot. They've both gone green now. So it's moved that compliance distance, particularly for the left one, has now gone to lower than the right-hand one because of the way that calculator works. So yes, it will affect it because effectively you're only putting in 40% of the amount of power that you were on FM.
And the other thing is you've used 400 watts as effectively as the worst case because
Yes.
that's our maximum license
That's
power.
absolutely right.
So that most people in the club will be
Yeah.
running 100, possibly 200
Yep.
watts, unless they're lucky enough to possess a linear.
Yeah.
So,
Ooh.
for the average club member, running 100 watts, those distances will be reduced even
Yeah.
further again.
Yeah. So at 100 watts,
Running SSB.
this bloody thing. We're talking about 1.8 metre compliance distance, which is
They are, are they?
significantly less.
Sorry?
That's running 100 watts.
Yeah, I've just done one
SSB,
now from my
yeah.
antenna on 50 watts.
So
It
does that
says
change anything on if you change
compliance
frequencies?
1.5 metres,
Yeah, the calculations
Vertical
do
separation
change if you
green.
change frequencies.
3.6.
So you would need to do an assessment for each.
So,
What they ask you to do is an assessment for each frequency and each mode and each antenna and each rig that you want to use.
Oh, in the new one.
But in reality, if you're using 3 different rigs and they're all chucking out 100 watts, they're going to be exactly the same.
So if you're on a 24-hour contest and you're changing frequencies,
Yeah, as long as you, yeah, so you need to just create a list of, you know, a file, if you like, of your compliance certificates for each frequency in
Okay.
each mode.
Out of interest, and again, for the benefit of the tape, what is the worst case? I mean, you're doing this on 80 metres.
Yeah.
We've done it on other frequencies, so if we moved, say, to 20 metres,
Okay.
is that worse or better?
Right, so it was 1.8 metres on, God, I hate black laptops. Actually, I hate these mouse pads. I hate them.
So what you're saying is you don't have to do any further assessment.
That's weird.
Thank you.
So the compliance distance there has dropped on
Yeah.
one, it has increased slightly on the other one.
It shouldn't increase by changing the, oh yeah, frequencies, yes. Yeah, so they will change.
Yeah.
Just double check.
I don't know without going through each individual frequency. I've got no idea how that works. I did try to go through the maths of this once and I gave up. I
Kerry, on the
thought, life
top
is
of
too
that-
short.
On the top of that list there, look, it says 2020 limits.
Yes,
So is that altered, or, I mean, have we, the thing that gets
yeah.
me is,
I've
I've looked online and so many different things, and it's like this, then you go all over the place. I'm so confused.
Kerry,
Oh, for crying out loud. What the hell is it doing there? Anybody? Yeah, I see.
Right, escape.
There's probably a close button hidden away. There is. On the top.
on the top left of the window, something it says there.
Hmm? Yeah, I can't get to the top left.
Can't get up here.
Just to ask another question while you're looking at that. Is my compliance said 1.2
Yeah.
metres, and then when I changed it to SS3, it's come up to low power compliant. With nothing
Oh,
on
it's
there.
gone so low that you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
You need to speak up.
Starting to concern me slightly, Kerry, is the fact if we're doing anything outside in the general public, we're going to have to now start adding this stuff to our risk assessments.
Yes. Thank you.
And that bit of script that you wrote for the...
I did send Kerry
Yeah.
Excel spreadsheet. I did the whole frequency band.
Will that work with that?
I don't know, I haven't seen it. I haven't compared it against it.
Is that 5 watts there, Kerry?
Yes, lost me configuration.
What area
Sorry.
have you selected, by the way? I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
What area have you selected?
Apparently none at all now.
Oh, you've got a halfway dipole.
You've got a halfway die.
Yeah, no, it's,
But it doesn't say if
ignore
it's end
that.
fed or centre fed, does it?
No.
But as far as your answer comes about ITU, I've worked a lot of years in ITU. You always go with the latest. With the latest edition.
Sure.
That,
But I've looked on a computer and it's like list and this, that, which one do you go to?
Yeah.
There's so many different things I just want
It's
to
all
go
doing
to.
it, it's all doing it in
Yeah.
you've always used.
Oh yeah, have you got one? That'd be a lot easier. Bloody touchpads on these are annoying.
When I was looking on a computer, I don't know which one's the latest one because there's the RST, there's this, there's that. It's like, which one do you go to?
As far as we are
Yeah. Yo, got it. No.
But when you're doing your own station, you know, if you stick with.
Is he left-handed? God, he is.
I don't see.
Oh, there he is. Oh,
You've
right.
got to also be a little bit pragmatic. Nobody's going to take over in your
Yeah.
unless you get.
Okay.
Slight interference. Nobody will actually do anything. It's got to actually raise it.
That's some fun with the ground.
Okay. Sorry, where were we?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we talked about the effect of the different bands and the different transmit modes. So, for example, somebody who's transmitting on FM, are you going to have something similar if you're using, say, FT8 because of the...
Yeah. What I think is, the reason I put FM up there is I don't think I've ever used FM on 80 metres. The reason I put FM up there is it's the worst case because it's 100% carrier while you're transmitting. So if you can get that to go green at the bottom on FM, then I don't think you need to worry about any other mode. That just says you comply. That's good enough.
That's the minimum height of any part of the antenna, isn't it?
It's the it's the minimum compliance distance is a minimum separation between any radiating part of the antenna and any non-involved person.
So that's 3.6 metres plus
1.8 metres. Yeah.
They're showing it, the dimensions by the boom. When you turn that antenna around, that element is going to be far more over towards the.
Oh no, they're not taking that into account, are they?
No.
Like an end-fed half-wave, the RF is at the beginning and the end, and nothing in the middle.
Yeah.
And then the dipole,
Yeah.
there's very little in the middle. It's all at
Yeah.
the end.
The
So-
diagram the diagrams
so
are misleading on there. They're only meant to say.
an
You
area.
know,
That
it's a good
assumes that you can turn that all the way round,
Yeah.
and it would be those figures,
Yes.
whichever way you point
Yeah.
it.
So it calculates based on the main lobe of the transmission.
Can you do me ground mounted antenna?
Hmm?
BTV6, ground mounted?
Probably.
You know, I saw it when it came up with the antenna.
What about a loop, you know, where you've got, you know, a certain distance off the ground, you've got to mount it?
Yeah, this is what I'm just interested
Which
in.
one you
John.
want?
That one.
BTV6, yeah?
You want it ground mounted?
0. Ground mounted.
Yeah, I think that will say. Yeah. So you still need to be 3.6 metres of clear, but being ground mounted, it means there's no vertical separation. But as long as somebody's more than 3.6 metres away horizontally, then you're okay. And say it's any distance. It doesn't matter whether it's vertical at a slant or horizontal.
What happens then with that? Because you're supposed to have radials out at the bottom as well for the ground plane. Do they count?
There
as
is an
the
interesting conundrum. Is what defines the radiating part of the antenna?
Don't touch the radio.
element? Yeah, but then is it 3.5 metres away? Is it away from
I
the-
don't.
Radius
Yeah.
probably about 4 millimetres under your north.
Yeah.
That
I mean,
has no
I would
effect.
be very, very tempted to ignore the radials on there. Conversely, if you've got a counterpoise,
The other thing is, it might be better to actually put it vertical, the antenna up there.
hmm?
It might be better to put the antenna vertical. That might make.
Sorry, yeah.
Probably both.
It won't make a tiniest bit of difference because it's assuming.
Yeah.
It might get, it doesn't even draw me a picture for that one. Anyway.
What about my loop where it's only mounted, you know, my siren?
Okay, your little stereo loop.
Is
I
that
think
on there?
that's on here. Yeah.
Magloop, big.
You've got a stereo MIDI loop.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. So that's actually got. Yeah. And look, what are we running
Yeah,
at?
that's at 400 watts as well.
I was going to say, how many have got amplifiers?
Sorry.
So the rest of us, we haven't, and we push out 100 watts. So why don't you change that to 100 watts instead of 400?
Yeah. Okay. As I say, I was trying to get this to a point where it's the worst case because if you can demonstrate compliance with the worst case, then if you comply at 400
Yep.
watts, you're by definition compliant at 100 watts.
Yeah.
So that was why it was
Basically,
done
we
that way.
put that loop on the ground in a 4 metre circle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Put up mag loop, see what it says on that.
yeah, so that loop that Eddie's, you've got it. Oh, sorry, it's John's got it, haven't you?
Yeah, you had a mag loop up there.
Yeah, you put a big bag loop on it. Please.
That's the
Yeah,
Syrio,
I
that's
think the
one-
Syrio
what
loop's
happens-
not,
So what happens if you've got a doublet fed with leather on? It's quite a popular
that's
antenna.
interesting. Why
Yeah,
would
It
that
was
do
last
that?
year anyway.
Something wrong there.
What if you took it off the ground too far?
Until they started.
Oh, we're at
using
100
that
watts
end
now,
fed, so
yeah.
they really went end fed now.
Just make sure the ends are 6, 7 foot up.
It's
Yeah.
like a G5 RV, isn't it?
That's ridiculous.
That's
Yeah,
fed
so
with leather on it,
0.7
so
metres.
Well, you're not sitting in it.
Well, actually a big,
Fence,
yeah. So, you know,
Put a seat in the middle.
yeah.
Yeah, you'll be all right.
Yeah, so 2.5 feet away from the antenna, you're perfectly all right.
That's on 80 metres though.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah.
This is free, I don't know.
Change it to 20 metres,
You bend onto a
and that
different
increases.
loop.
Hang on, there's something going on here, isn't there?
I think it's,
It's been coming down in frequency, so the wavelengths are getting larger.
the wavelength's getting shorter, yeah. Yeah.
Which is why we've got greater distances at VHF, UHF than we have at HF.
Think about microwaves.
Yeah, well, it's wavelength in relation to body size, isn't it? The fact that if you've got an 80 metre wavelength, your body is like,
It's going to go right through you.
4 metres.
There's a microwave.
absorption rate is,
Put it on 4 metres. 'Cause
Microwave is
that's-
going to excite your molecules.
Put it on 4 metres, because that's the worst wavelength. The half wave is us.
Yeah. What antenna should we use for that?
well, let's have an 8 element Yagi, let's have some fun with that so we can zap
Just a
it.
dipole, really.
Okay.
There you go.
We mentioned earlier that a beam, a Yagi, is an interesting case because you've got an 8 element Yagi and it's calculated that we've got a 20 dB gain.
Yeah. That's a bit high,
Yeah, that's huge, 100 times gain, something like that.
Oh, it's a bit of moon bounce on 4 metres.
Yeah, so we're chucking 100 watts in and we're getting 1726 watts.
My 23 SEMS aerial has 22D, it does have 22
I know,
dB
I know.
gain, so-
But you can see quite happily there that we now have a compliance distance which is quite large.
The beam's up there anyway.
That's going to be interesting.
That's on the ground.
I want to do some moon bounce.
Yeah,
isn't it?
but remember that that is calculating in the worst, in the main lobe.
Yeah.
So if you're standing looking right smack down the centre of that antenna, then you need to be 10 metres away.
Yeah. That's 55.
And it's up there anyway.
And if it's up there, you know, if it's 5 metres up and you're standing on the ground, you then have to look to make sure there's no little side
That's,
lobes that
that's
come up.
zero.
Zero ground height as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you change it, if you say, I've got a 10 metre mast.
Yeah.
Wrong one.
So, yeah. Interesting. It seems to be directly related to how high. Oh, that's directivity factor. Sorry,
Yeah.
in the wrong damn column. Yeah.
So if you change to 10, you want again, mate.
You're not very good at that, are you?
Should we put it up? How high do you want to go?
10?
10 metres, yeah.
Yeah. So. So the compliance distance is still 9.4 metres, but it assumes.
You're in front of it.
Well, yeah, although it doesn't know which way we got that polarised, sorry. Yeah, there's a reason. Well, it doesn't really matter. Unless if it's pointing directly down at the person on the ground.
Try it,
Ground
Then-
bounce.
Eh?
Ground bounce, not moon bounce.
Yeah, so if it was pointing directly down, so that's where the pictures don't work. So this is assuming that the antenna, main lobe of the antenna is pointing directly at the person.
Well, how you can do compliance on that,
Yeah.
you can say, yeah, I've got 9 metres, but there's no gain between the back radar and where I'm standing.
Yeah.
So you can say that's got 0
Yeah.
gain, therefore it's safe for me. It's not safe for Dicky Bird at the end of the house, though.
Yeah. Yeah, if you've got a radiation chart for your antenna,
Yeah,
and you say it's here,
yeah.
and the side lobes down at the bottom are 20
Yeah.
dB down on
Yeah,
the main lobe, then that's the numbers you can put in there.
yeah.
But it just means you have to say then that there's nobody going to be standing on a 10-metre high
They
set of
can't
step
fly.
ladders 8 metres away from your antenna.
Yeah. Hovering.
You're pointing it at the moment.
But you're pointing at the moon anyway, yeah.
Showing on section 10 metres is 34 feet.
To the end of your house, it's not one end.
No, I think about my next door neighbour behind me. Massive, there was a garden.
Yeah.
So they
Sorry,
have
Mark
to
wants
be.
to ask a question.
They're above you,
If you're mobile and you've got an antenna on your car, and you're parked up,
You have to
you're
stop every
pumping
5
100
feet.
watts, does this still apply? I mean, if you're in a
It
car
still
park in
applies.
Dartmoor or somewhere
It
like
still applies no matter what you're doing. It still applies. The need for compliance still applies even if you're working portable, despite the fact that you're probably not transmitting more than 10 watts anyway, most of the time. So if we change that down, let's say you're in your car, 2 metres, chucking out 50 watt, 100 watts.
No, I think we do that on mobile. I mean, my
50
my
tops.
857 is 50 watts
50
FM.
watts.
Yeah, okay, 50 watts. And
Vertical.
what have we got?
So, well, hang on. We've got custom at the bottom.
Interesting.
Well, quarter
I put
wave
2
or
metres
something,
in
don't
there,
you,
didn't I?
Yeah, they've dropped, they've missed the trick there, haven't
Haven't they just? Yeah.
It's all rubber
2
duck,
metres,
right, that's really useful.
2 element, that.
So I see, I've sold it for you, Kerry. See what custom comes up with?
Hmm?
There is a custom
Yeah,
specification.
it just comes up with a blank setting and allows you to put in your own
There's a Slim
numbers.
Jim there.
Yeah,
Oh, Slim Jims,
Yeah.
probably fair enough.
so it allows you to put in your own
Yeah,
figures.
so we really
yeah.
Kerry. You drop on Slim Jim. That's back close enough, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's going to be
Yeah.
one.
that.
10 metres high.
Two.
Car's only what?
Well, it's going to
1.5
be 1.6 metres tall
Yeah.
at the best case. Yeah. So it says that a non-evolved person has got to be 2 metres away.
But if you're driving,
So
you won't be within them for the 6
for a 6 minute period, unless they're really
That's all
So if
tailgating.
you're parked,
And if
your
they,
tailgate.
and if they want to come and catch you,
Yeah, 6 minutes starts every
I'm going to find
millimetre.
that driver.
I mean, come up on the middle of Dartmoor to find you. Are you complying?
Yeah, so
This,
the short,
I believe is the fact there's no.
Next to him and try him.
You're probably non-compliant with a 5-watt handheld then.
we are, because it's less than 5 foot, less than 10 watts.
There's nothing in this calculation about absorption.
No,
I'm
No.
sitting inside a big tin box, which I tend to do quite often when I'm driving, which acts quite like a Faraday cage.
yeah.
My
Yeah,
shed-
that's why I said, right on the second or third slide, I said there are lots of ways of doing this.
Yeah.
You could actually model your situation and say, yes, my neighbour is in her front room, but she's got a flint wall that,
Order.
that doesn't, has got, a radio permissivity, which is a lot less than is ideal. So she'll actually be quite happy leaning up against the wall because it won't get through the wall. But you've got to prove that. Or at least you've got to give a reasonable justification for that.
Which is why you're not worried about your antenna on the gatepost, I presume.
Well, I'm not worried anyway because I spoke to Susie next door and she said, I haven't been in there for 2 years. So I said, well, don't.
Oh, can I use it for storage?
Secondary radio shack.
Yeah. We won't go there. So the reason I chose this calculator is because it will give you the worst. It will give you the worst case, and if you can comply with the worst case. Okay. So if we go back to my, did I save that configuration we had earlier? Right, loss of them in lot. Okay. Let me quickly.
Why does it keep throwing on that handheld? Did you do that, or is it just something they put in there?
What's that? Oh, it's a default one. It comes pre-configured in the machine for some reason. Let me set everything to back where it was.
60 metres, mate, I think.
Yeah, it'd be compliant.
Your antenna's very high off the ground.
Oh, that's right.
No, it's fine.
It'd be nice to get up that high, but I think the planners might have an issue with that one. Yeah. So when we started that, I said I'd
Can you tell us what's in those boxes, because I can't see it.
I did earlier, Derek. Yeah, the first one is about how much power,
Yeah.
and at what frequency, and in what mode you're chucking power out.
Yeah.
The second lot, the feeder box here, is how much is being lost between your radio and the antenna. So that's how much coax you've got and what the losses of the coax is. And then the third set lot is all about the antenna, how high it is, what type, polarization. Yeah. And down the bottom here, there are two calculations, one using an older version of the mathematics that they used and one using the newer one.
So what's the difference between the right and the left there then?
Mathematics.
I looked at it, couldn't see any difference.
Yeah.
Kerry, have you got balance side feeder on there?
Probably.
Every wire feed, there you go.
Yeah.
Makes zero difference.
Yeah, it won't be a little different. Feeder loss naught. That's nice.
What-
20 metres.
What's the point of having that red box to saying further assessment is required?
Yes.
It's not needed.
Yeah.
What's the point of putting that there?
I think if you go down below 10 watts,
It disappears or goes free.
the whole lot at the bottom disappears. And it says,
Not low power compliant then, should it?
yeah. So if that box goes green, all the stuff that was underneath it now disappears. Because you're compliant by not transmitting more than 10 watts.
You'd have to be QRP then.
No, not necessarily, because I've just done it on here.
50 watts, it still goes green.
50 watts on a Wyndham,
Mm.
and it's coming up low power
Yeah.
compliant.
Yeah.
There's no drawings.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's all about, it's not about what your radio is putting out,
Yeah.
it's about E EIRP.
Because it's 2 0,
So you
you
could
can only
check
run
out
up to
1,000
50
watts
watts
of
on
shit.
the radio.
Oh, right.
Actually,
50 watts, let's see if it changes.
can we just test that theory then? Because what Eddie's just said.
Yeah.
What do you say, Ed? If you were running on SSB,
Right, what I've got on here at the moment is 80 metres, SSB,
yeah,
transmitter power 50 watts,
yeah,
EcoFlex 10, cable length 20 metres, I'll put antenna type, Wyndham, horizontal at 5.5 metres, which is 18 foot.
You should change your cables, right, Kerry?
Okay there.
Yeah.
What was you running, did you say?
Ultraflex 10.
Ultraflex 10.
Okay. Yeah. So this is, because it's SSB,
Yeah.
okay, it assumes a mode factor of only 20%.
So it's
And
below
then
10
I
watts.
left everything the same and
Yeah.
just changed SSB to FT8
Yeah,
and it gave me 1.2 metres.
yeah, exactly. The reason being, SSB assumes that the amount of power that you're transmitting out is only 20% of the capability because it's modulated. And if you're quiet, or you're not speaking, or pauses, or even in between individual bits, that envelope power is less.
FT8,
Yeah, I can do that. So 20%, and you're only talking for half of the time, means it's only 10% of 100 watts.
Can you put that on FT8 now then?
Yep. And that's why it said you're low power compliant, because effectively you're transmitting less than 10 watts.
it's the average.
Even
It's
though
the average.
it's the
power.
average.
The
Yeah.
FT8 is 100% of the time.
Yeah,
it's
if you change that to
transmitting.
FT8, okay, well, you're transmitting and then you're listening and then you're transmitting, so it's 50%
You're
again.
transmitting, you're transmitting.
Okay.
Gentlemen,
Yeah,
thank you.
so that will change now, assuming that we've still got the same thing in there,
Yeah.
50 watts.
Same antenna and everything,
Yeah.
just changed mode basically.
Yeah, so we've now got a compliance distance of 1.2 metres.
And the actual antenna is 3.7, so,
Yeah, and I thought you said it was 5.5, sorry.
well, yeah, but it's saying you've got vertical
It
separation.
means that you're, yes, somebody between, yeah, So it means you've got this box here means that it's calculated that you've got a 3.7 metre clearance between your antenna and the top
Yeah.
of anybody that happens to be standing at the
And it
closest
only
point
needs to
to
be
it.
1.2, so
Actually, it only needs to be 0. So if you set that height to 1.8 plus 1.2, okay, it will say, yeah, 1.2 metres compliance distance. That's 1.8. Yeah. And if you go down slightly below that, that should change to red, which it does. Okay. So it's adding on the height of an average, 1.8 metres.
no, it's not a problem. is
But
it?
So it's not a problem for you, yeah.
There is in these calculations a flaw as well, where it actually, you get below a certain point,
Mm.
it assumes it's going to be at
But that's
least
the
this.
lowest part of the
Yeah.
antenna, the other end of
Yeah.
it is about 40 foot in the air.
Yeah.
It
So-
comes as a snake down to the end of the garden.
Yeah. I mean, what this seems to be pushing us towards is sticking wire in the sky rather than other antennas, because you can usually shove a wire up higher than your compliance distance.
Kerry, if you've got a bus 6-channel antenna,
Yeah.
which is on the ground,
Yeah, I think, did Lynn ask for that one earlier?
I just got in here because people talking.
Yeah, so if you have a height of the antenna of 0,
Yeah,
yeah, so it gives you, you need to make sure that nobody comes within 1.3 metres.
That's at 50 watts.
Yeah, that's set 50
It
watts.
doesn't change very much, does it?
Yeah,
The
yeah, probably not
The
actually.
Royal Navy just said 6 foot from any aerial. So they weren't far off, were they?
At 800 watts.
Which is why the army's sitting on the other side of canvas.
Yeah.
250 watt out there, antenna there. Just little sign saying don't touch this antenna.
So if you were transmitting FM at full needle power into a Hustler 6B TV, it says it's ground mounted,
Yeah.
so actually it'd be difficult for a person to get underneath it, but there you are. But if they're more than 3.6 metres away,
Okay.
you're okay. So as long as somebody can't
10
get
foot.
within 3.6 metres of your antenna,
Yeah, I thought.
then you comply.
Well, you could actually reduce that.
And that's your level- that's your level
Look at the
foot.
load, you'll find that your, if you monitor it, you'll find your load.
That's right. Yeah.
Higher up, so you
Yeah.
could be a little bit lower.
Yeah.
Kerry,
Yeah.
can I just ask you on your last statement?
Yes.
Because I do have a ground-mounted
Right.
Surya HF 360, which is mounted 9 feet off the ground.
Right.
So what was the power that you said about this? Was it 50 watts or 100?
What were we measuring here? So you've got a,
It's an 82.6 30-foot fiberglass Surya
okay,
with a ballon on the bottom.
yeah,
It's lead fed. It'll be lead
Which is
fed.
then fed,
Yeah, so it's basically lead fed dipole.
but only 9 feet off the ground is what's recommended by the instructions.
So as long as it,
Yeah, you've got one there.
mm,
The only virtual antenna they've given us is a BTV6.
See, I'm all right now, because I'm in
Yeah.
QRP, I'm only
it's got to
7
be
watts.
3.3.
But if I get the next licence,
yeah.
then I'm going to be...
Well, yeah.
It's a very good antenna.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that you've got, I mean, that's a reasonably good bet. But if you're putting in 50 watts, even in FM, you're only talking about a horizontal separation of 1.3 metres. That's 4
Height
feet.
in Kerry, sorry.
Huh?
And don't forget as well, you're only allowed to do 10 watts anyway.
Yeah, sorry, that's if that was ground mounted,
Yeah.
you'd only
You're
need to
actually
be
saying he wants to
1.3
get not 3 metres up.
3 metres.
So it was 9 feet.
3?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
There you go, no problem.
So the compliance distance is still 1.3 metres, isn't it? But now it's assuming that that's going to be at an angle
I
rather
mean,
than
it's
just
got to be
purely
3 or
horizontal.
4 metres to the brick of the house next door.
Divine,
anyway.
yeah,
In which case you comply.
yeah.
And you probably still be compliant running at transmitted power of 100 watts and putting on the SSB.
Oh, right.
Thank you very much. Do you want to pop that up to 100 watts SSB so we can see it?
I'll try.
It's just a very good antenna.
Send that to Kerry.
There you go, yeah. Oh, look.
Oh, look.
The green.
Yeah.
That's running 100 watts on RSS.
Yeah.
So your data modes and your FM are going to be your problem.
Yeah.
Or we're going to be a bit more careful. SSB at 100 watts,
Yeah.
get away with that.
There's a point of interest, has it got slow scan TV in it?
I don't think it has actually.
Well, that would be 100%, wouldn't it? That'd be 100% of the time. Because it's noise all the time.
Yeah, it's
I
still
mean,
be
there'd be a little bit
other digital modes, isn't it, or something like that.
It'd be a good 90 at least.
Yeah, I mean you can assume analog TV.
Analog TV, I do.
You're dead.
Yeah. So it's assuming a mode factor of 60% there. Yeah, it's still not 100%, is it? Because it's moving around.
So you only give it a 60%.
Yeah, mode factor. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, SSB is actually one of the easiest ones because of that 20% mode factor. Yeah, it comes out.
Okay. British, Royal Radio Society of Great Britain. Why have they got it in America? Analog.
If your handheld is capable of transmitting more than 10 watts, then you need to calculate it. If it's less than 10 watts, then you might definitely require it.
head anyway.
Yeah.
Anything 10 or under.
Yeah, anything 10 or under. Yeah.
That's one, mate.
Hmm?
It's very good.
Yeah. Once you've actually got, if you can get something that's nice and green, first thing to do is to save it. Okay? And the next thing to do would be to print it. Okay, so you'd save and print it.
Saves a PDF, yeah.
And it will print you out a sheet, which you can then,
Wasted
as a
paper.
file, sorry, a PDF file, which you can then save in your shack records. And if anybody says, have you done your EMF compliance? You go, yeah, I'll get on with it.
Lady comes round.
Yeah, so it basically just puts exactly what we put in earlier and then says, yeah. It doesn't actually tell you whether it's green or not, that's for you
Well, we do.
to
See the
work out.
cones?
Yeah.
Yeah. The digital
Yep,
picture.
exactly right, yeah.
You can't tell it with the cones round it.
It's basically saying be sensible.
It's actually saying be sensible.
Using
Yeah.
login, which not many of us have left.
Yeah. But the thing to remember is, if it says you're not compliant, it's not the end of the world. All it means is you've got to have a bit of a think about what you're doing, whether there's another way of looking at this. You know, is the directionality of that antenna different to what this is assuming? Like you said, if you know the main, if you've got your meter that's 6 meters up in the air, but you've got a compliance distance of 9.4, but actually somebody would have to be on a 10-meter step ladder to be able to get in front of the main load or flying, then, you've got to be sensible about it.
Yeah.
I think that the short and long and short of it is, it's for you to demonstrate that you've taken that into account and that you're compliant. And if you can convince an Ofcom man when he comes along that you've done the work, then he'll walk away and say, thank you very much. End of story. Okay. If he ever turns up. Yeah. So, in short, thank you.
Well done.
Well, thanks very, very much for that, Kerry. That's going to be really, really useful. Sorry to be a bit draconian, guys, but as you do appreciate, this is going to go onto our YouTube channel, so keep the background noise down a little bit to enable the questions and the answers to be heard by the people who are listening to this later is quite important. So sorry I've had to jump in a couple of times and crack the whip. But no, that's been really, really useful, I think. One of the things I found interesting is it seems to be less onerous than the old one was.
It depends. The old code, the 1998 ITU thing uses slightly different calculating, and it always assumed that there was a magnetic factor at a quarter of a wavelength, which was great until you got down to 80 meters, and it's like saying you've got to be 20 meters away before you could be compliant with it, which was daft, to be perfectly honest. And that was taken out, and actually the calculator strips that bit out anyway. And then some of the mathematics were changed around a bit. which actually makes me wonder, do they still know what they're talking about? Because, you know, if it was safe in 1998 and it's not safe now, does that mean it's not safe now? In which case, why are we allowed to use the 1998 compliance?
Yeah. So would your advice be then, and this is again for everyone in this room and those listening,
Yeah.
would your advice be that it would be advisable, if you've done the calculations previously on the old calculator and you've got your file of information, to redo them again on this one and see if there are any differences?
As a matter of interest, yes. But the way that the RSGB and Ofcom have agreed that we do this is that if you can demonstrate compliance to either the 1998 rules or the 2020 rules, then they're happy. So I'd say if you've done your calculations based on the 1998 rules a little while ago, and it said you weren't compliant, it might be worth going back and doing it on the 2020 ones in case it is.
So really, what you're saying is that, you know, use whichever one works for you.
Precisely.
Yeah, I mean, if Ofcom and the RSGB and whatever are happy to accept either as acceptable, then, as Kerry has just said, if you were not compliant before, you may well be now. So it is worth going back and doing a revisit. I know from a personal point of view, I'm going to go back and revisit all of mine.
Yes, me too.
Just to see, out of interest, whether there is a change. And I think probably one of the best suggestions I can give you is get hold of one of them, print a PDF, stick it all on there, save the paper.
Yeah.
You know, we need to try and save resources of the world, so if you can stick it all on a memory stick, you can plug it straight in a computer and you've got it all, or you can make a copy of it and give it to anybody who needs it. Don, you've got a question?
Yeah, one of the things with this is that it doesn't take into account your antenna location.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you model an antenna, and so we get these lovely big donut patterns, which is great, provided you've got
Nothing metallic within.
a 50-acre field to put it in. When you've got an antenna sat alongside your house, where's you know, that radiation pattern
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
just going, you know.
Yeah.
So it says, oh, my main lobe is over there. Actually, it might not be. It might be over there because it's bouncing off there, and getting down there. So it's only really it's pretty crude, really.
It is crude.
You know, you know, you can do that if you're setting up a dipole in the middle of the field to broadcast to the local population. That's fine.
Yeah.
You're going to get something approaching what you can see off your antenna modelling, but not because we will. And everybody's situation is different.
Yes.
Keep my wife running around.
I think
You have two antennas, exactly the same antennas, two different houses, you get completely different results.
Yeah.
I think what you've got to think about, you've almost got to think about it a little bit like the Pirates of the Caribbean's pirate code.
Yeah.
You've got to think of them as guidelines. You know, if you do that,
if you can produce a bit of paper with a bit of green ink on it, right? You know,
Precisely.
that's it. And the fact is that that's going to fry my neighbour, but he or she is only going to be there for 2 seconds when they go out and put the rubbish in the dustbin.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, that's not my antenna. I've got an off-centre bed, but because I've got it on 4 poles, so I've actually got it like a square horizontal loop going back on itself. So where's the lobe on that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
In the middle, mate.
Yeah. Everybody's situation is going to be different, as Donna quite rightly says. So this really, I mean, as Kerry will tell you, this is at best going to be a good approximation. And what it appears to be trying to do is to just make us think about what we're doing with our antennas and thinking about the people around us and the potential hazard that we may be causing. Lynn?
We're actually better off, if we go out in the public domain, we're actually better off running vertical antennas to a greater or lesser degree, because if you run a vertical, you've got to keep people away from it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Horizontal
If
separation.
you put a horizontal, you've got to keep them away from a lot more
Yeah.
from underneath it.
It's like a minefield around it.
But I think you,
Well, no, it's just cones, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, 80 metres, you're looking at 1.2 clearance, so down
Yeah.
to 20 metres, it goes out at 4. So
Yeah.
you're looking at setting 4 cones out with a bit of rope round it.
Yeah,
With
if
a
you're
big
using
sign
the-
saying, do not pee over this line.
Yeah, if you're using a 31 metre GR5V, it's a little bit different.
I think the best point you made earlier on actually, Lynn, was when we are going to go out and do something as a club station, is making sure that we have put this into the risk assessment. Because again, it proves to anybody who comes and challenges us
Pins
that
it
we
on.
have carried out all due diligence,
Yeah.
and we can quite legitimately say to a member of the public, you know, there you are, that is what the calculator has told us, this is what the safety margins are, we have set out a safety margin plus 25% or whatever, therefore we are perfectly safe to be doing what we're doing.
And pin that piece of paper on a post.
On
So
their
people can
forehead.
see it.
We need to
It
tell
could
them
be.
how much space we need. They actually put that on the paperwork.
Agreed, agreed, that is part of it now, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're going to have to say we need a 5 metre by 10 metre area because we put antenna at the back of the plot.
But
or
to put a
whatever.
9B9
Yeah.
as a ZPG Portfolio in a camper van, you need that space anyway.
Yeah. Okay, do we have any further questions for Kerry?
I would say that the USB thing, keep as a backup, keep the rest of it on a machine, because
Yeah.
these USB drives have a habit of going, I don't want to play it.
Yeah, more than one, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
Alan,
yeah.
Yeah, always have a backup, that's a good
That in
point.
mind.
Just to
Any
finish
other
off
questions for anybody else?
what Don was saying, if you're in the middle of a field, you don't have to worry about the sheep.
Fried mutton.
So you're
The
telling
other
me
practical-
sheep's lives don't matter?
No,
Absolutely.
fried mutton's good.
The other practical solution is, of course, if you're transmitting where you're driving or whatever, then the ultimate opposite solution is just get your wife to take the foundation. That way she then becomes, you don't have to worry about
Becomes
it.
the involved person then.
Yes.
I was talking
point.
to another ham radio from Crawley, who's done exactly that. His wife is now a foundation licence holder because she's now an involved person.
Yeah.
There you are.
I think I might get salad.
Any more for any more?
If you're
Thank you.
running a G5, do they class the ladder as radiating element?
Who knows?
There's always one, isn't there?
The correct answer to this, which you don't use, is yes. The answer that RSGB and Ofcom are looking for is no, it's not.
So what was the question?
If you're using something in which the feeder is part of the radiating element,
Oh, I mean inverted out.
or GR5V,
G5RV, yeah.
if it's J5RV with a ladder line feeder up there, the ladder line, well, it doesn't actually radiate, but
No, but it cancels.
yeah, yes, exactly. But, but they
Okay.
seem to be the radiating part of the element. They're just of the antenna. They're just looking literally at the antenna, not at the feed.
Wonderful.
Thank you for your attention, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed it this evening. And again,
Okay.
a big thank you to Kerry for doing it for us.
Yeah, well done, Kerry.
Thank you.
Those people watching offline, hope you've enjoyed it as well.
RS coming back.